Did you know that you could be pulling fresh strawberries off your patio in the middle of December? Not frozen ones, not store-bought ones, real, sun-ripened, juice-dripping strawberries grown by you in a container no matter where you live. Sounds insane, right? That's exactly why I had to make this video, because once I cracked this method, I couldn't stop thinking about how many people are out here missing out on this. So buckle up, because by the time this video's done, you're going to know everything you need to grow strawberries year-round in containers, and trust me, it's way simpler than you think. If you're new here and you love practical, no-nonsense growing advice that actually works in a real world, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. I put out content specifically for people who want to grow real food in real spaces without needing a farm or a PhD in agriculture. Now, let's get into it. Let me start by telling you something that took me way too long to figure out. Most people who try growing strawberries fail, not because they're bad gardeners, but because nobody ever told them the most important thing. And that one thing? It's the variety. I spent 2 full seasons confused about why my strawberry plants would give me a beautiful harvest in June and then just die on me. Nothing after that. I'd water them, feed them, talk to them like they were my children, and still nothing. Turns out, I was growing the wrong type of strawberry entirely for what I was trying to do. The moment I switched things up, everything changed, and I'm going to make sure you don't waste 2 seasons figuring that out the way I did. So here's what you need to understand first. There are 3 types of strawberry plants, and they are not created equal. The first type is called June bearers. These are the classic, heavy-producing plants that dump out one massive flush of berries in early summer and then spend the rest of the year just sitting there looking pretty. If your goal is making jam or doing some kind of big summer harvest, June bearers are fine. But for year-round container growing, they're basically useless to you. You'd be putting in all this effort for 6 weeks of fruit and 8 months of disappointment. The second type is ever-bearing strawberries. These are a step up. They give you 2, sometimes 3 flushes throughout the growing season. A little in spring, a little in summer, maybe a small push in early fall. Better, but still not what we're going after. The third type, and this is the one that changes the whole game, is day-neutral strawberries. These plants literally do not care about the length of the day. They don't need a specific season to trigger fruiting. As long as temperatures are sitting somewhere between 50 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit, they will keep flowering and producing berries on a continuous cycle. That's the magic. That's the secret that most beginner container gardeners never hear about. And once you know it, you can't.
The varieties I personally keep coming back to are Albion, Seascape, and San Andreas. If you can get your hands on any of those 3 at a local nursery or online, you're starting from a position of strength. Albion is my personal favorite. It produces firm, incredibly flavorful berries that hold up well even in changing temperatures, and the plant is just tough. It keeps going when other varieties would have given up. Seascape is fantastic if you're in a warmer climate. San Andreas sits right in the middle, reliable, consistent, and not too fussy. Any of these will serve you well for a year-round container setup. Now let's talk about the container itself, because this is where I see people make a mistake that ends their entire growing season before it even begins. I'm guilty of this too, by the way. Early on, I bought this beautiful glazed ceramic planter from a garden store. It looked amazing. I was so proud of it sitting on my porch. Planted my strawberries, watered them, watched them grow, and then about 3 weeks later, the whole thing collapsed. Root rot. Because that stunning ceramic pot had 0 drainage at the bottom. The water just sat there and the roots drowned. Lesson learned the hard way. Your container absolutely must have drainage holes. I cannot stress this enough. If you fall in love with a pot that doesn't have them, grab a drill and put some in before you do anything else. It takes 2 minutes and it could save your entire crop. For size, you want something at least 12 inches wide and somewhere between 8 and 10 inches deep. Strawberries have a relatively shallow root system, so you don't need to go crazy with depth, but you do need enough soil volume that the container isn't drying out every single afternoon in the middle of summer. Now for the actual container material. This matters more than most people think. Plastic containers retain moisture longer than terracotta, which is a huge advantage when temperatures climb in July and August. Terracotta is beautiful, no question, but you'll find yourself watering almost twice as often because terracotta breathes and releases moisture through the walls. In a cooler climate or a shadier spot, that might not be an issue, but if your setup is out in full sun, plastic or resin containers are going to be your best.
Fabric grow bags are honestly underrated for strawberries. They breathe well, they prevent roots from circling around the inside of the container, and they're incredibly affordable. A standard 10-gallon fabric bag can comfortably hold 3 to 4 strawberry plants and costs almost nothing. They're lightweight, you can move them easily, and they tend to produce really healthy root systems because the air at the edges of the bag naturally prunes the roots as they grow. If you're on a tight budget or just starting out, fabric bags are the way to go. Strawberry towers and vertical planters are also worth mentioning if you're tight on space. They stack vertically and let you grow a surprising number of plants in a very small footprint. Great for balconies and small patios. Just know that plants in the top pockets tend to dry out faster than the ones lower down, so you'll want to water a little more attentively with those setups. All right, let's talk soil, because this is where a lot of people make a quiet mistake that quietly ruins their entire season. They go to the garden center, grab the cheapest bag of potting soil they can find, dump it in, and wonder why their plants look sad 3 weeks later. I get it, it feels like dirt is dirt, but strawberries are actually pretty particular about what they're sitting in, and getting the soil mix right from the start makes everything else easier. The mix I use and swear by is roughly 60% high-quality potting mix, 30% compost, and 10% perlite. Each of those 3 ingredients is doing a specific job. The potting mix provides structure and holds moisture without compacting too hard. The compost brings in slow-release nutrients and beneficial microbes that feed your plant over a long period of time. And the perlite, that white stuff that looks like tiny styrofoam balls, keeps the soil loose and airy deep in the root zone, which prevents waterlogging even if you accidentally overwater. I'll be completely honest with you. I skipped the perlite for a long time because I thought it was optional, just an extra step. Then I had a season where I lost nearly half of my container plants to root rot, despite having containers with drainage holes. Added perlite to every single mix after that season, and the problem never came back. Don't skip it. One more thing about soil that most people overlook. Strawberries prefer a slightly acidic environment, somewhere in the pH range of 5.5 to 6.8. Most good quality potting mixes already fall in that range, but if you want to be sure, a cheap soil pH meter from any garden center will give you a reading in about 30 seconds. If your pH is running too high, you can bring it down gradually over a few weeks by mixing in a small amount of sulfur. It's a minor detail, but it's the kind of minor detail that separates a mediocre harvest from a genuinely great one. Now we're getting to the part that surprises almost everyone, planting depth. You would not believe how many strawberry plants die every year because of this one thing. Plant too deep and the crown rots. Plant too shallow and the roots dry out. There's a very specific sweet spot that you need to hit every single time, and once you see it, you'll never get it wrong again. Every strawberry plant has what's called a crown. It's that thick, stubby central piece where the leaves emerge from the top and the roots hang down from the bottom. When you're planting, that crown needs to sit right at the surface of the soil, not buried, not floating above the soil line, right at it, like the soil is a belt sitting around the waist of the plant. The roots should be fully buried and spread out downward into the mix. The crown itself should be right at that surface level, half in and half out. I space my plants about 8 to 10 inches apart within the container. For a standard 12-inch round pot, that's comfortably 2 plants. For a longer window box, you might fit 3 or 4 depending on the length. Don't cram them in. I know the urge is there, more plants feels like more berries, but overcrowding creates poor airflow around the leaves, and poor airflow is basically an open invitation for fungal disease. Give each plant a little room to breathe. After planting, water deeply until you see moisture running out of the drainage holes. You'll probably notice the soil settles and drops a bit after that first watering. Just top it up to bring the crowns back to the right position. Then lay down a thin layer of straw mulch on top, about ½ inch to 1 inch thick. It keeps moisture in the soil, stops dirt from splashing up onto the fruit when you water, and it honestly makes your containers look really clean and intentional. Let's talk about watering, because this is the #1 thing that trips people up once the plants are in the ground. The problem isn't that container watering is complicated. The problem is that containers dry out so much faster than people expect, especially when temperatures rise in the summer. The best way to know when to water is also the simplest. Stick your finger about 1 inch down into the soil. If it's dry at that depth, water. If it still feels damp, leave it alone. Do that every day and you will never overwater or underwater your strawberries. In the peak of summer, you might be watering every single day. In cooler weather, every 3 or 4 days might be enough. The soil is telling you what it needs. You just have to listen. When you do water, go deep. Soak the container until water flows freely out of the drainage holes. That deep watering encourages roots to grow down into the soil rather than sitting shallow at the surface, which makes for a much more resilient plant overall. Sunlight is the other big one. Strawberries want a minimum of 6 to 8 hours of direct sun every day. More is generally better, up to a point. Once temperatures push into the mid-90s Fahrenheit consistently, the plants can start to stress and may temporarily pause fruit production. If you're growing in a hot climate, this is where the portability of containers becomes a real advantage. Move them so they get morning sun, but catch some shade in the hottest part of the afternoon. I do this every summer, and it makes a noticeable difference in how the plants perform through the heat. Feeding is something container growers often underestimate. When you're growing in a pot, the plant has access to a limited amount of soil and therefore a limited supply of nutrients. Those nutrients get used up fast when the plant is actively growing and producing fruit. I feed my container strawberries every 2 to 3 weeks during the growing season with a balanced liquid organic fertilizer. Something around a 10-10-10 ratio works great. The plants I feed on a consistent schedule outproduce the ones I neglect by a genuinely embarrassing margin. Small, regular doses of fertilizer are far more effective than one heavy feeding every couple of months. Think of it like eating. Your body does better with regular meals than with one giant meal a week. If this video is giving you value so far and you're learning things you never knew about growing strawberries in containers, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Like, share, and drop a comment. Let me know what you think. There's so much more coming. More growing guides, more practical tips, more of exactly this kind of content. I'd love to have you be part of this community. Now let's keep going because we're getting to the part that I think is the most exciting thing about this whole method. Now here's something nobody talks about enough. Runners. If you've grown strawberries before, you've seen them. Long, vine-like stems that shoot out horizontally from the mother plant with a little baby plantlet at the end. They look fascinating, and your instinct is probably to leave them alone and let the plant do its thing. But if your goal is maximum fruit production from a container setup, you need to cut them off. Every runner a plant sends out is energy being redirected away from fruit production. The plant is putting resources into making babies instead of making berries. Clip them off cleanly right at the base as soon as you see them, and your fruit production will visibly improve. That said, don't throw those runners in the trash. They're free plants. If you want to expand your container collection, just pin the baby plantlet down into a small pot of moist soil while it's still connected to the mother plant. Let it sit there for a couple of weeks until it roots, then snip the runner and you've got an independent strawberry plant ready to go. I built my entire setup this way, starting from just a few original plants, and it cost nothing. Overwintering. This is where the year-round part of year-round production actually lives, and this is where most container gardeners completely drop the ball. They see temperatures dropping, assume the season is over, and just leave their plants outside to freeze. And then they're shocked in spring when the plants come back weak or don't come back at all. Here's what you need to know. Day-neutral strawberries will keep producing right up until temperatures drop consistently below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The container setup gives you a tool that garden bed growers don't have, the ability to move your plants. When fall arrives and nighttime temperatures start dipping toward the low 40s, move your containers up against a south-facing wall of your house or fence. That wall absorbs heat from the sun throughout the day and radiates it back out overnight, giving your plants a few extra degrees of warmth. It's a small move, but it can genuinely buy you several additional weeks of harvest before winter sets in. Once temperatures are dropping below freezing on a regular basis, it's time to think about protecting the plants through the winter. If you have a garage, an unheated basement, or a covered porch that stays above about 20 degrees Fahrenheit, move your containers there. The plants will go dormant, and that is completely fine. In fact, they actually need a cold rest period to reset and come back strong the following spring. Water them very lightly while they're dormant, maybe once every 3 to 4 weeks, just enough to keep the roots from drying out completely. They'll look dead. They're not. Come spring, move them back into the sun, give them a deep watering and a light feeding, and watch them absolutely explode back to life. For those of you in milder climates, zones 8 and above, your plants may not go fully dormant at all. You can keep them producing through the winter with a little protection. A simple cold frame built over your containers, or even a clear plastic storage bin turned upside down over the plants on cold nights, acts like a small greenhouse. It traps heat and keeps frost off the leaves and fruit. I've personally harvested strawberries in January using this exact method. The berries are smaller than your summer fruit, and they take longer to ripen, but the flavor is something else entirely. Because the sugars concentrate in the cooler temperatures, the taste is sweeter and more intense than anything you'd get in peak summer. It's one of those small growing moments that genuinely stops you in your tracks. Now let's talk about what happens when things go sideways, because they will at some point, and I want you to be ready. The most common problem container strawberry growers deal with is gray mold, which you might also hear called botrytis. It shows up as a fuzzy, grayish coating on the fruit and sometimes on the stems. It thrives when there's too much moisture sitting on the plant and not enough airflow moving around the leaves and berries. The fix is straightforward once you understand what's causing it. Stop watering from overhead, always water at the soil level, and keep the leaves and fruit as dry as possible. Make sure your plants aren't crowded, and pick ripe fruit as soon as it's ready. Don't leave ripe berries on the plant thinking you'll get to them tomorrow. Pick them and eat them. That's what they're there for. Birds are the other classic frustration. They somehow have a sixth sense for knowing exactly when your strawberries are 1 day away from perfect ripeness, and they will find them every single time. The best protection is a simple frame made from garden stakes with bird netting draped over the top, positioned so the netting sits several inches away from the fruit. Draping netting directly on the plant doesn't work. Birds will just peck right through it. Give that barrier some space, and your berries will be safe. Aphids and spider mites can show up during hot, dry stretches. Honestly, a really forceful spray of water from a garden hose is often all you need to knock them off. If they keep coming back, a neem oil spray applied in the evening, not in direct sun, will handle them without harming the plant or anything beneficial around it.
Get into the habit of flipping over the leaves and checking the undersides once a week during the warmer months. Catching pests early makes them a minor inconvenience. Ignoring them until they've taken over makes them a genuine problem. One last thing I want to share with you before we wrap up, because this is the long game secret to keeping a container strawberry setup productive for years and years. Your plants are not immortal. Every 3 to 4 years, you'll notice them starting to slow down. Smaller fruit, lower yields, less energy overall. That's just the natural lifespan of a strawberry plant, and it's nothing to stress about, as long as you've been doing one thing. If you've been rooting those runners like I mentioned earlier, you've already got a rotation of young, vigorous plants ready to replace the older ones. Pull out the aging plants, refresh the soil in your containers with fresh compost and potting mix, and put your new plants in. The whole setup keeps renewing itself season after season, without you having to spend money on new plants or start from scratch. This is exactly how I've kept my container strawberry garden running for over a decade. The plants change, the containers stay the same, the harvest keeps coming. So, let's bring this all together. Growing strawberries year-round in containers is not a fantasy. It is completely, absolutely doable, and it's not even that hard once you have the right information. Start with day-neutral varieties like Albion, Seascape, or San Andreas. Use containers with good drainage and enough volume to hold moisture through the heat. Mix your soil right with potting mix, compost, and perlite. Plant at the correct depth with the crowns sitting right at the soil surface. Water consistently, feed every 2 to 3 weeks, and cut those runners the moment you see them. And when the seasons shift, use the portability of your containers to your advantage instead of just watching your plants freeze. That's the whole method. That's what makes this work when a regular garden bed would have shut down months ago. If this video helped you see strawberry growing in a completely different way, drop a comment and tell me which variety are you planning to try first. I genuinely want to know. I read every single comment, and I love hearing from people who are actually out there putting this stuff into practice. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a really good time. Hit that subscribe button and join this community. We're all here growing real food in real spaces, and there's a lot more great content coming your way. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.